Welcome back to the Perfectly Homeless podcast.
We've spent 50 episodes scoring U.S. states on this exact system. Now we're taking the same scorecard global.
Because, homelessness looks radically different depending on which country you're actually in. So today we are building a scorecard for Kenya.
Right. And just like our usual process, the score will evolve in real time during the episode.
Yeah, it will not be revealed all at once. So let's jump straight into the country overview.
So when you look at the scale of homelessness in Kenya, the data shows this really massive, almost unbelievable drop.
You're talking about the 2025 National Census for Street Families, right?
Yeah, exactly. The census reported a massive 60% drop in the street population. I mean, we are talking about going from 46,639 individuals in 2018 down to just 18,049 in 2025.
Which is just a staggering drop on paper. But we really need to look at who is actually most affected and who makes up that remaining 18,000. There's a very stark demographic split here.
Right. It's heavily male-dominated, 78.6% male and just 21.4% female.
And geographically, it's intensely concentrated in major urban hubs. You've got Nairobi with over 4,600 individuals and places like Nakuru and Mombasa right behind.
But, you have to look at the systemic patterns that shape this. The push factors are things like severe poverty, domestic abuse, and some incredibly complex historic land tenure issues.
Which go all the way back to colonial displacement.
Exactly. I mean, nomadic pastoralists were evicted from the Rift Valley for tea plantations, which created this foundational scarcity of land.
Right.
And then post-independence, you had these violently contested land schemes, plus the post-election violence in the Rift Valley, like hundreds of thousands of people literally fleeing burning homes.
So families were completely cut off from their traditional safety nets. And that brings up a really critical difference from the U.S. baseline that you, as the listener, might be used to.
Yeah, the visibility aspect.
Exactly. In the U.S., we often define housing insecurity by visible street sleeping. But in Kenya, it's deeply tied to massive informal slum living and rapid, unguided urbanization.
Right, it's hidden. It's not just someone on a park bench. It's 10 people sleeping in a structurally unsound shack in a massive informal settlement.
So keeping that reality in mind, let's evaluate our very first category, housing affordability.
Well, the conditions and context here revolve around a staggering national deficit of over 2 million homes. To fix this, the government launched the Affordable Housing Program.
The AHP, aiming to build 250,000 units annually.
Right. They want to move away from a landscape where the average home is just completely out of reach for the masses. The ambition is great, but the lived reality of how this is funded is heavily controversial.
Because they implemented a mandatory 1.5% housing levy on all formal employees.
Yeah, and that's exactly where the math breaks down. 80% of Kenya's workforce operates in the informal sector.
Right, the artisans, the hawkers, daily wage laborers.
Exactly. And their average monthly income is around 14,000 Kenyan shillings. Because they operate in cash, they aren't paying this formal levy.
But the flip side is they also don't qualify for the financing to actually buy these newly built homes because they don't have formal pay slips.
Right. Banks won't underwrite them.
It's like forcing a neighborhood to fund a community pool, but the poorest residents can't afford the entrance fee to ever use it. Even the lowest tier of social housing in places like Kibera, Soweto East requires a 3,800 shilling monthly payment.
Which is just impossible when you're feeding a family on an erratic 14,000 shillings a month.
Exactly. So this lowers the overall picture. Our initial score looks pretty grim. Let's move to category 2, shelter access.
So traditionally, shelter access here has been driven by a network of over 250 non-governmental organizations. Places like Rescue Data Center and Kwaitu Home of Peace.
Offering drop-in centers, washing facilities, basic meals, that sort of thing.
Right. But today, the system is experiencing a major systemic shift driven by the government's Street Families Rehabilitation Trust Fund. They are actively moving away from institutional shelter-based care.
And pivoting toward family-centric reintegration instead.
Yeah, because they recognize that long-term institutionalization breaks critical social bonds. The priority is now rescuing people and putting them back with their families.
Okay, wait, I have to ask a critical question here, though. If domestic abuse is a major push factor, does dismantling physical shelters in favor of this reintegration model leave a dangerous gap for those who genuinely have no safe family to return to?
Yes, that is a massive tension. The intent is to preserve the family unit, which is good, but the immediate emergency off-ramp for someone fleeing abuse tonight is rapidly shrinking.
Right, so the safety net is basically becoming conditional. This shifts the score. We acknowledge the positive intent of family preservation, but it creates a dangerous vulnerability. Which leads us to category 3, criminalization and enforcement.
So the context here is heavily tied to government rescue operations. In 2025, they allocated 40 million shillings just for rehab and training.
Which involves sweeps to clear street families from the cities. Right.
Yes. Now, supporters of this argue that these interventions restore human dignity. They provide vocational training and protect vulnerable women and girls from severe gender-based violence and HIV exposure on the streets.
Okay, so that's the state's view. But what do critics contend? We have to look at both sides.
Well, civil society organizations argue this is just forced displacement. They strongly question that 60% drop in the census numbers.
Because they think the street families aren't actually disappearing.
Exactly. Critics argue they are merely being displaced into highly precarious, hidden, informal tenements just to sanitize the streets. They aren't counted anymore, but they are no less vulnerable.
Wow. Okay, so based on this, the current draft score is, well, if you look at the preliminary score overlay right now, we are sitting at a draft score of a D+.
And we really want to emphasize to you, this is not the final score.
Right. The remaining categories could significantly rescue or completely tank the result. Moving into category 4, vehicle dwelling friendliness. To understand this, you have to entirely strip away the U.S. phenomenon of RVs or van life. Vehicular homelessness in Kenya is driven strictly by labor precarity.
It's purely survival.
Completely. We're looking at localized, labor-related vehicular survival among gig economy workers, taxi drivers, and truck drivers. It's actually known locally as the going Karura phenomenon.
So they literally sleep in their workspaces.
Yeah, they sleep in their vehicles because they cannot afford the dual costs of housing and doing business.
Because if you pay rent, you can't afford the vehicle lease or fuel to earn a living. The vehicle isn't a substitute home. It's a symptom of a grueling big economy trap.
Absolutely.
This lowers the overall picture significantly. There's no infrastructure or legal protection for this, so let's look at Category 5, outreach and social services.
Here, we actually see massive safety net attempts. The state has the street family's information management system for evidence-based tracking.
And they're doing a lot of proactive prevention, right? Yeah, exactly. They use cash transfer programs for orphans and vulnerable children, and the NSHE initiative, which is specifically aimed at keeping families housed during economic shocks.
Plus, you have NGOs like the Smile Foundation Kenya focusing on mentorship and vocational skills.
Right. It's a very strong approach to preventing family separation in the first place.
So this raises the overall picture. It's a bright spot. But let's see where those pathways lead in Category 6. Pathways to permanent housing.
Right, bringing it back to the end goal. The tenant purchase scheme is accessed through the digitized Boma Yangu platform.
But the lived reality is that this creates a massive digital divide.
Oh, completely. To access it, you need a smartphone, stable IDs, and you have to make digital deposits. This fundamentally excludes the most vulnerable urban poor.
Right. And for the few who do manage it, there's a massive gentrification risk or elite capture, where housing built in the name of slum dwellers ends up occupied by middle-class civil servants.
Exactly. The subsidized costs are still just too high for the poorest citizens.
So this shifts the score. The pathway exists on paper, but it acts as a maze for the actual homeless. Let's do our final summary.
Okay, so major strengths. Strong non-governmental outreach, proactive cash transfer programs preventing family separation, and a highly ambitious national housing vision.
Right. And the major weaknesses. The digital divide in housing access, the severe mismatch between minimum wage and housing costs, and the displacement of street populations into invisible informal tenements.
So let's get to the category grades.
Housing affordability grade. F, shelter access grade. C, criminalization and enforcement grade. D, vehicle dwelling friendliness grade. F, outreach and social services grade. B minus, pathways to permanent housing grade. D plus.
Which brings us to the final reveal.
The final perfectly homeless country score is a D+. Despite an ambitious national housing agenda and strong social service frameworks, Kenya's poorest citizens are structurally priced out of formal housing and digitally excluded from the solutions built in their name.
In the end, you can't construct your way out of a housing crisis if the foundation is built on an economy that leaves 80% of its workforce standing outside the door.
That's the perfectly homeless country score for Kenya.
If you would like to help support this channel, please hit like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. See you on the next one.